Everybody, welcome back once again. My name is Jeremy, and I want to say thank you for joining us today on the Crew First Culture podcast. Today, I've got Matt Broom with me here today, and I'm looking forward to getting into some conversation with Matt. Matt is a fellow podcast host. I had the pleasure of being on one of his episodes this week and really enjoyed kind of being on the other side of that. So hopefully he'll get a little bit of the same. But what I find really interesting about Matt and his podcast is he focuses a lot on financial areas and how they are involved with the firefighter's life and all that. And you just don't see a lot of that. So interested in kind of where this is go and what I can learn. And without anything further, Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing awesome, Jeremy. Thanks for having me on, brother.
No problem. Looking forward to it. So go ahead and give us a little bio. Tell us about yourself and kind of how fire service is tied into the financial arena, and let's
Sure.
start it.
So I was born and raised in a suburb of Atlanta in a county called Gwinnett County, which is where I currently serve as a firefighter paramedic. And growing up, I had no idea I wanted to be in the fire service. It was not really a thought. I always thought I was going to grow up to be a pro ball player or something like that, normal childhood dream kind of thing. And as I grew up and, started college, and I always had a real interest in money and economics and things of that nature. So I actually went and got a degree in economics. But as I started to finish my degree in economics, I realized that I didn't want to do anything that I thought an economist would do. So I started looking for other avenues, and I started thinking about people that I really admire, and some of the people that came to mind were firefighters. So I kind of spurred my interest in the fire service. And, the only place that I really cared to work was the community that I grew up in. So that was the only fire department that I applied for. And I applied there. I honestly didn't really know what I was getting myself into. When I got hired, I didn't even really understand that we ran as much EMS as we do. So, it was
Yep.
kind of a shot in the dark for me. I thought it might be something that I enjoy, and turned out that I was definitely right. It's been a fantastic journey. I've been on there for about 6.5 years now. I'm on our county hazmat team, and we're a very busy station. And as far as the money goes, that when I got hired there, it's probably similar for many fire departments. You get hired and you got to go through the HR stuff. You got to sit down and learn about sexual harassment and yada, yada, yada. And part of that is retirement benefits. And we came into the portion of the retirement benefits, and I was lucky that I kind of had an above average knowledge in this stuff coming into it, because I had a natural interest in it. And I looked around the room and nobody knew how to make these decisions, and they didn't give any education around it. And it really just made me sick to see a group of, 30 individuals have a decision placed upon them that's going to affect their future well-being, because we don't have a pension. It's a defined contribution plan. So you have to decide how much you're going to put into it. And, it's the responsibility falls solely on the firefighter to make these types of decisions. And there was no education, no help, no assistance in how to make this decision. And since that day, it never really sat right with me. So I had, my own financial journey that I kind of had to go through. My wife and I got married. We had some debt. We paid off $25,000 in a year, and we only made $50,000 that first year. And I just got fired up. I started learning everything I could about investing. And this is, around about the time I'm going through recruit school and my first year out in the field, and, learning the fire service stuff. Then also, just diving in as deep as I can, learning about investments and insurance and budgeting and everything out there. And, I decided that, I wanted to take that knowledge and try to do my best to help firefighters make better money decisions so that they can focus on what really matters, which is, uh, going to work and really enjoying it, not worrying about the money, spending time with your family and not worrying about, how you're going to pay for this vacation and things like that. Because in my personal opinion, money is just not that important unless, it's if you haven't taken care of the basics, money's always going to be an issue because it's a recurring problem. But if you take the time to focus on it and you make some decisions that are going to set you up well into the future, then money kind of falls into the background. You can just focus on living
Yep.
life. And that's kind of my,
Yep.
origin story behind how I got into it.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. As long as you have the essentials taken care of, the things that are necessities, money is, kind of isn't near as stressful, I would say. And but that's a big step for a lot of people. And to be honest, the fire service throughout the nation, there are some good paid departments, but there it's kind of known as a not a very well paid occupation. And so something that goes along with that makes it nice is that we only work certain days a month, so you always have that opportunity to have side jobs, and that definitely helps. And so you just do what you do or do what you can do, but it really helps to know what the heck you're doing. And so I really appreciate you kind of filling a niche that I don't feel like I've heard. And like I said, I think it's really cool. And I think I failed to give the name of it. So Matt runs the 2448 podcast. And so if you have not heard of that or heard of Matt, I want to definitely lean you towards that direction. And especially if you have some needs in the financial area and just want to learn about it, it's a great place to really start getting your feet wet in some of these areas. So what what do you think are kind of a good starting point for a lot of people out there that don't know anything about kind of the financial world of our job? Where do they need to be headed? What do they need to be learning?
So really the most important building block of financial success is how you manage your income. If you consider that, let's say a very normal combination of a household is like a firefighter and a nurse. I'm a firefighter. My wife is a nurse. We're kind of everybody knows those couples. They're very, ubiquitous
Mm-hmm.
with firefighters. So, you know, if you're working for a reasonably paid career department or, otherwise you're probably earning between the two of you somewhere between 70 and $100,000. And just to make the numbers easy, if you're making $100,000, as a household in 10 years, you're going to have $1 million pass through your hands. And that is your most important financial tool, that $1 million that comes through your household every 10 years or more, 2 million in 20 years
Yep.
if you don't, and that's without any raises. So learning how to actually prioritize your income is the most important thing. And you do that through the power of a budget. And nobody likes to be told that, hey, you need to do a budget, but it truly is the most important part of financial success because you have that income come in. If you don't tell it where to go, oftentimes it just gets lost in the mix and you're left with much more month than you do money. But when you're operating on a budget, the money comes in, you tell it where to go, you know where it's going, and you become the master of the money instead of the money being your master. You're not always out there chasing the dollar. There's a lot of great
Yep.
resources out there as far as budgeting. Personally, I'm just old school. I like Excel. And I think that most people do well just to make their own budget spreadsheet. And, if
Yep.
you're a firefighter and you do any type of office work at all ever, I'm sure you've dealt with some sort of Excel spreadsheet. It's addition and subtraction. You start with your income, and then you list all your fixed expenses, which is like your mortgage and car payments and that kind of stuff. Then you move into the variable expenses, which is going out to eat and groceries and whatever else. And you just subtract it from that income until you're left with zero. It's called a zero-based budget. You give every dollar a job. And you can do that through an Excel spreadsheet, which I think it's good for people to go out and actually make their own because then, they have a little bit of buy-in, a little bit of ownership of it.
Yeah.
Or you can use technology.
Yep.
There's some fantastic technology out there. A couple of my favorites is YNAB. You Need a Budget. It's a fantastic budgeting app. Other than that, you also have Every Dollar, which is a Dave Ramsey inspired budgeting app, which I'm a huge Dave Ramsey fan. So if you're really looking for the basics of getting, taking control of your finances, I would go pick up The Total Money Makeover by Dave Ramsey. read through it, learn those baby steps. And that really does lay such a solid foundation for long-term financial success that, once you start budgeting, you pay off all your consumer debt, credit cards, car loans, all this stuff that's just dragging you down. One of my favorite quotes is from Charlie Munger, which is Warren Buffett's partner. He says, it's really tough to get ahead when you're paying 18%. And that's true. When you got those credit cards that are paying 18%, it's almost impossible to get ahead. So you get on the budget, you prioritize debt pay down, you become debt free. Then you can really start focusing on, building wealth into the future. And I think almost any firefighter can do that. It just takes a lot of discipline and
Yeah.
execution, really.
Yeah. Those two are definitely key and not easy, especially the discipline part. And kind of I think it's a Dave Ramsey quote, but he basically, I'll probably paraphrase it a little bit, but basically says, make your money work for you, or you're going to be working for it. Basically, and that's kind of what you're saying is if you don't tell it what to do, if you don't put it in its place, you will be chasing it forever. And so,
Yeah, and the
that's
norm
absolutely good.
the norm for many fire departments, which is still is the norm for a lot of them, is that you do your 20 or 30 years, you retire with this pension, and that's going to take care of you in retirement. But many fire departments, mine included, have gone away from defined benefit pensions. We don't have that anymore, so the responsibility then falls solely on the firefighter to plan for and find success moving into retirement. And that takes a 20 or 30 year time frame to plan successfully for that. So you have to start thinking about these things early on, which most 20-25-year-old firemen coming into the job,
Oh yeah,
that's the last thing on their mind, man.
yeah,
Saving for retirement, whatever, let's go buy a big
yeah,
truck, new tires, whatever it is. And but it really does take that kind of focus on the front side. And if you start early, the power of compounding takes off. I can't remember who said it, but somebody said, people who understand interest earn it, while others who don't pay it. And that's kind of going back to getting rid of the debt. If you don't understand interest, you're going to be paying it. But once you do, and you pay off that debt, and you start realizing that you can use compound interest to your advantage, and over a 30-year time frame, what you can do is just unbelievable. You'll start prioritizing that, and then you get 50, 55, 60 years old, and boom, you can move into a successful retirement. And that doesn't mean that you just quit working. I think the pensions of old and some other things have done kind of a disservice towards people who leave a job, and it's just considered that you're going to go sit on a beach and sip margaritas or play golf every day or whatever. Retirement truly is not about just quitting work. It's about giving yourself the freedom to make the choice of whether or not you want to go to work, or whether you want to pursue a passion, whether you want to just volunteer full-time at your church, or do whatever it is. It just gives you the
yeah,
option to pursue whatever you're passionate about, and not just walk away from work altogether.
yeah. I I say it all the time, at my department when these conversations are brought up, and yeah, I've seen so many older guys that have retired since I've been on, and they go and they get a electrician's job, or they go drive a truck, all whatever it is, and it's jobs that they don't want to do, and I'm like, that is the very last thing I will do. I will not leave this job health wise, hopefully, unless or until I am secure enough to be able to do whatever the heck we want to do, me and my wife. And I'm not saying I won't have some type of job or side job or whatever, but I want to be in a spot. If that's the case, it's because I want to do it. It's not because I have to do it. And so, I've always been somebody that hasn't really paid that much attention. We have a pension. We also have 457 and different things like that as well. But it's always been like, well, I've only got 5 years on. I've only got 10 years on. I've got those in place. I just don't know anything about it. Well, I'm sitting at 18 now, and working on 19 years, not far from 20, And it's probably getting to that arena or that area that I probably need to start learning about this stuff and kind of making sure I am on the right track. I do have those in place, but are there things I need to be doing to kind of get those tweaked in a better area? So I think
I
no
would,
matter what time you have on, you need to get into it for sure.
yeah. And as far as pensioners go, it's huge to take advantage of that 457 plan or, some other type of investment, whether it's a Roth IRA or traditional IRA,
Yeah,
something outside of just that pension, because, pensions have always been viewed as a safe bet. But moving into the future, there's government pensions at risk all over the place. And I don't want to, freak
yeah,
anybody out, but it's one of those situations to where you have to consider that, you could be 10 or 15 years into retirement and your organization be, unable to provide you the benefit that it promised you and have to cut your benefit. So at that point, if all you've done is count on that pension, what do? You got your pension's been slashed. You might have Social Security if you're in a system where you paid into that. If you don't have any other investments, you're really going to be struggling. And I don't want to, freak anybody out. Your pension may be very well funded, but it's something that you should be thinking about. If you're in the pension fund,
yeah,
if you're in a pension fund with your fire department, go look at how well funded it is. What kind of numbers are they using to create these projections? Because, I look at a lot of pension plans and they're using 7.5 or 8% as a discount rate to come up with how well funded they are. And if you know, move that down, and especially in today's current, low to negative interest rate environment, if you move the discount rate down to like 4%, they're not near as well funded as what many people are led to believe by the accounting firms that are doing the auditing of these things. So, pensions aren't the most stable thing either, and there could be a issue with that in retirement if you have, the underlying agency has some funding issues, and so you need to have a backup plan is the most important thing.
yeah,
uh, we always, whenever we do training in the fire, in the fire service, we always have plan A, B, and C. It's not something that if something doesn't work, we have a backup plan. We got something else in the back of our mind that we're going to back up and try to get the job done. It's the same thing with your retirement savings. If the pension goes away or benefits get slashed in retirement, what's your backup plan? That 457 is an excellent vehicle to save a ton of money if you have the extra cash flow to do so. But you have to, control your lifestyle, reduce spending, and prioritize that saving. And then, worst case scenario, pension benefits get cut. No problem. We got this 457, we got this IRA, whatever it is, set aside already. We can start living off of that.
yeah. That's a good point. And like I said, I don't. I will be very honest in saying I don't understand a lot of that stuff, and definitely something I need to probably sit down with my wife and both of us really start digging into kind of what we got and the nuts and bolts of it. So something I would like to ask you, just to, and I know there's a lot of people out there probably kind of the same questions, is you have kind of the pre-tax type investments, and then you have the, I guess you call it the post-tax, whatever,
Roth.
the after. So what are your opinions on those? Is it good to kind of have a little bit of both? Is it good to focus on one? What do you where do you sit on that area, that topic?
So the classic like financial advisor planner answer is it depends. And a lot of it depends on tax rates and things of that nature, which we don't really know what the tax rates will be in the future. But in my personal opinion, I think the Roth accounts are about as good as it gets. And what that means is, you're contributing into those accounts after you've paid taxes on the money. So the benefit comes in on the backside when all the growth is tax free. So let's say over your career, if you have the option to do a Roth 457, you decide to utilize the Roth, and throughout your fire service career, you contribute $100,000 to that account. But by the time you retire, it's grown to 500,000. Well, the 400,000 in growth is all tax free, and that benefit is unbelievable. You've
Yeah,
paid taxes on that 100,000 going in, and now you're getting $400,000 of tax free money in retirement, versus if you put it into a pre-tax account, if you have just a traditional 457 and you're contributing that, it reduces your taxable income now, which many firefighters are in a lower tax bracket, so they're not getting as good of a discount as what some other folks that are in a much higher tax
Yeah.
brackets are getting. But you're saving on taxes now. But then once you get into retirement, every withdrawal you take out of there, you're going to have to pay income taxes on it. And at age 72, unless it changes, it recently changed from 70 and a half to 72, the federal government says you have to take this money out, and that's called required minimum distributions. Whereas if you had it in a Roth 457 and then rolled that money over into a Roth IRA, there's no required minimum distributions of a Roth IRA. So you could let that money continue to grow in perpetuity and make that, kind of like a legacy fund to leave to your children. If you're living well on a defined benefit pension, you don't need the additional funds, having them in a Roth account allows it to just continue growing and growing and growing, versus the traditional pre-tax accounts. You have to start taking required minimum distributions at age 72, which once you couple in a defined benefit pension program, plus a social security payment, plus a required minimum distribution, quite oftentimes it can knock you up into the next tax bracket in retirement, thus costing you even more money. So,
Yeah.
To answer the question from just the easy answer, I think you can't really go wrong with a Roth account. And it's because, if you're doing this over a long time frame, the growth is going to be much more than your contributions, which that'll be all tax free. So you can run the numbers almost any way you want. That's going to be your best, most tax efficient way to do it.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, and definitely. So I do have both, and I just kind of really approached it from a non-educational. Well, if I have one that's got some benefits over here, and this one's got different benefits, if I kind of do both of them, hopefully I'll gain some benefit from both of them. But at the same time, it's like that whole mindset of I want to do two things decently, or do I want to do one thing really well? So, it's just one of them things where I don't know. I mean, you got to kind of pick your battles and kind of figure out what's more important, I guess.
And taking that split strategy is really not bad at all. The important thing is that you're prioritizing saving, whether it's in a pre-tax account or a Roth account. And in my opinion, doesn't make as big a difference as it does just to make sure that you're prioritizing the saving side of it. Because even once you get into retirement, and retirement for most firefighters is pretty young. I mean, you're talking 50 to 55 years old if you're retiring with a pension. If you've done all your savings pre-tax up until that point, then you can start doing Roth conversions, which converts the money over to Roth, at that time. And you have to pay taxes on it then, but then you can still continue that growth for the next 30 years or so. So there's some strategies to get out of the pre-tax and get into a Roth even in retirement. But the important thing is that you're just saving. You've come up with a plan to reach your retirement goal, and you're just doing that consistently.
Yeah. So you kind of started off the conversation with budgeting, and that's obviously a a base that we all have to really, if we want to gain any kind of financial, just anything, it starts with budgeting. And saving, we're kind of adding to that next level. It's part of that as well. And so I think budgeting to some people is just a foreign idea. If you have parents that weren't budgeters, you obviously weren't given that skill, or blessed with the opportunity to know what that is. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are like that. To be honest, I never really understood anything of it until, like you said, I took the Dave Ramsey course. Oh shit, it's probably been 8 years ago now. And that's kind of where I learned how to do that stuff. And so I think it's very important for people out there that don't understand it completely, or need some help with it, to really branch out, reach out to get some of these resources and learn how to do it.
I think about it like, we go to a work and structure fire, and you've got this pumper, and you've got a supply line coming from a hydrant into this pumper. Well, that's your income coming in. Now you've got to deploy lines and figure out where to send that water. That's the budget. The budget is telling your money where to go. So you got the water coming in. You're at the pump panel. That's your budget. You're telling this water where to go. The budget does the same thing. Your money comes in. You tell it where to go, and that's where it goes. And it's we do these things naturally in our businesses, in our departments. Every fire department out there has a budget. They do it more on a yearly basis. I would suggest doing your personal budget on a monthly basis or even bi-weekly. My wife and I get paid bi-weekly. Yep. That's actually how we do ours. Every 2 weeks we sit down and we do our budget. And we're in such a rhythm with it. It doesn't take us long at all. So it's not really much of a hindrance to our day to sit down and do a budget for 20 or 30 minutes. And oftentimes we butt heads over the budget, and we both come into it with the realization that, hey, if we have a problem about what we're doing with our money or anything coming up, like, this is our time to air our grievances. Yep. And we've used that time as almost like our own kind of marital counseling session, and talk about our money and whatever we got going on. And then we move on with our day. We kind of finalize it. We move on. But for whatever reason, these skills aren't taught in school or anywhere else. And I think once upon a time, I think that's probably what home economics used to be. And then for some reason, home ec just turned into how to cook. And it used to be how to balance a checkbook and do those types of things. Mm-hmm. But people forgot that ec stood for economics. So they quit, putting money into that class. And I would love to see home economics become a thing in high schools across the country again, and focus on, how to manage your money coming in. But when you sit down to do the budget, if you've never done one before, it can be quite overwhelming, because you're looking at, you've got all these expenses that that you're going to have, your mortgage or rent or car payment and insurance, all this type of stuff. But if you've never really looked at what else you spend, you don't know where your other money goes. Like, you don't know how much, how much beer money you're spending, or how much, clothes money, your fast food, just all these things, they just add up. Yep. So typically what I would suggest is that you print out about 3 months of your bank statements, and you go through that, get, 2 or 3 different colors of highlighters, and come up with some sort of color code for fixed or variable or whatever. And then go through that bank statement and just highlight each individual line item. What is this? Is this a fixed expense? Is this a variable expense? Or is this other? And go through that thing and code it all to kind of figure out, just get an idea of where your spending is going. Then once you've done that, then you go to some sort of, because that's kind of backward looking. You're looking at how you have been spending your money. Well, then you got to do forward looking. You got to actually create a budget spreadsheet or use technology, an app to create a budget that's forward looking. So this is how we've been spending our money. Now let's focus on how we want to spend our money. And then you basically do the same thing. You have fixed expenses, variable expenses, other goals, whatever it may be. And you have to go through line item by line item. And at first, it's going to suck. Like, you're going to be wrong. You're not going to get the numbers right. It's going to be tedious. It's going to feel like a pain in the butt. But just like any new skill, it takes time to learn how to do that. So like, you really need a 3 to 6 month runway of doing a monthly budget before you get into any type of rhythm. And unfortunately, many folks just get fed up with it before that point, and they stop before they kind of hit the sweet spot. And my wife and I, it's kind of funny. Our first, very romantic first weekend of marriage, we sat down and did a budget. And I told her, coming into it, she had some credit card debt. I had some student loan debt. And I said, listen, once we get married, we're going to pay off all of our debt. We're going to follow a budget. We're going to make sure that, we can prioritize our money in a manner that allows us to live the lives that we want to live. We're not going to be stuck on this consumer, rat race kind of a hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And that first weekend we sat down, we did a budget. We just, figured out how much extra cash flow we were going to have to put towards debt. And that was really all it took. And it took a long time to get the budget down. We've had multiple iterations on different spreadsheets, and I'm kind of nerdy with all that kind of stuff. So I enjoy making spreadsheets. But now, like I said, we sit down every 2 weeks. I put the numbers in. She comes into the room. We sit down. We talk about it. Make sure everything's all good. And then boom, we go about our way. And our savings are pretty much automated. Our most things we just are automated. The mortgage payment comes
Yep.
out. Everything comes out, and we don't really have to think about a whole lot except for we've done well enough to where we don't really have any bills other than our home and our home bills. And it's like, okay, well, what do we want to do with this excess cash flow? Which right now it's all going into our nursery renovation since we have our first child on the way. But it just there's no stress around it once you've taken these initial kind of, as Dave Ramsey calls them, baby steps. Once you've taken those baby steps and you've saved up a little bit of money, whether it's $1,000 or maybe more for your initial emergency fund, you've gotten in the rhythm of budgeting, you paid off all that debt. And from there, it just becomes whatever you want to do. And, I think a lot of folks have the urge to build wealth over time. Though, I don't think many people have never really sat down and thought about what that means to them, how much they need in retirement, what it
Yeah.
actually means to build wealth. But once you get the stress of having to pay all these different bills off all the time, then you can kind of detach yourself from, the current moment and think about what you want down the road. Then you can start thinking about, well, how much do we really need to walk away from these jobs? And okay, well, how much do we need to be saving per month to do that? And in order to get to that scenario where you're really thinking, long term, you've got to take care of those basics of paying off the debt. And really the thing that helps me sleep most at night is our emergency fund. It truly is. If there's one financial goal that I would love for somebody to, take action on, a firefighter that's listening to this that just can't seem to get ahead, that, every month it seems like the car's breaking down and they're having to put it on a credit card, save up that initial emergency fund and then
Yeah.
pay off those debts. And then once you get past that point to where you've paid off all your credit cards and other debts, save up a fully funded emergency fund, which typical wisdom is 3 to 6 months, which in most firefighter jobs is probably plenty since they're fairly stable jobs. Having 6 months of expenses in the bank is, I mean, it's the best sleep aid I've ever been able to find.
Yeah.
You don't have to, you're not going to bed worried about how you're going to pay for this or that. You've got this money set aside. The roof starts leaking, whatever. You pay for it out of there. You keep on trucking. And
Yeah.
I think a lot of folks see that pile of cash sitting in their bank account and they think, well, what else could I be doing with it? Could I put it into my business? Could I invest it? Could I do whatever? And it's like, this money is not to actually earn money. That money is there as insurance, and you pay for insurance.
Yeah.
So you're going to leave it in cash, something liquid. And yeah, over time, you're going to lose some money because of inflation and whatever. But that's how insurance works. You pay for insurance. So that emergency fund is set aside as an insurance policy against, chaos showing up at your doorstep, which, we all know as firefighters that chaos can show up any day of the week.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I have been here, so I can say that I know this is the truth. But I know a lot of us, we're in a situation where things aren't that great financially, and so to think about sitting down and actually looking at it on paper is scary. I'll say that I definitely know that feeling. It's almost like the feeling of, I know there's something wrong with my body right now, but I don't want to go to the doctor and find out there really is, that type of mentality. And I think that's kind of a hurdle that some of us have got to get over it, for the same reason as the doctor scenario. It's not going away. And chances are it's probably getting worse the longer you go without addressing it. So we've just really got to step away from that, get outside of our comfort zone, get the knowledge that we need, and just do something. Something is better than nothing. And you talked about really kind of basically the steps that Ramsey goes into. The whole emergency fund and the building up 6 months of bills and things like that. And some of that, if you don't know about it, and if you haven't done any of this type of studying and learning, it sounds so far away. It's like, I can barely pay my electric bill this month. How can I put $1,000 in the bank? How can I have all that money for 6 months? I can't do that. Well, you you can't do it for sure if you aren't doing something. If you're not actively coming up with a plan and putting that in place. And so that is really what I want to kind of challenge everybody out there, that just do something. Start somewhere, and know it'll get better, but it won't if you don't do anything at all.
Yeah, and I like how you brought up kind of that feeling you get when you know something's wrong, and but you don't want to look at it. And somebody that I listen to a lot is a gentleman named Dr. Jordan B. Peterson. I'm sure many folks listen to him, but he often tells a story of the Knights of the Round Table going out looking for the Holy Grail, and the when they all go out looking for it in the forest, they all enter the forest at the darkest place to them, the way they viewed it. And that's kind of when these things crop up, we feel this anxiety, we feel this stress, we want to look away from it. But no, you got to kind of dig in on that. Like, you actually have to investigate that. That's where you need to enter the forest, in that dark place where you're feeling that stress and anxiety. Because otherwise, if you just push it off to the side, that monster is going to continue to grow. This is why all these fairy tales about monsters growing in the dark and stuff as kids, like, those things don't go away as adults. They just turn into stress and anxiety. It's the same thing, just in adulthood. And a lot of times those monsters turn into money problems that we experience stress and anxiety over. And that's what I love about the Ramsey program, the baby steps, is it allows you to focus on one thing at a time, taking action on one thing. And that's, step one in the baby steps is save $1,000 emergency fund. Once somebody who's been behind on their bills for, however long, they accomplish that first step and they see $1,000 sitting in their bank account, I mean, you start to feel bulletproof at that point. It's like, oh, okay, I can do this. And then once they start paying off the debt and that first credit card gets paid off, it's, that's why they call it a debt snowball. That thing just starts picking up steam, and boom, 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 you knock them
Yep.
out. And depending on how much debt you have and, how much excess cash flow, like, when you get on the other side of that debt pay down, it is unbelievable. Because I can tell you, I've been in the position when I felt that feeling in my gut when I didn't want to log into my bank account because I was afraid I was going to see a red number in there. Like, most people have felt that before at some point in their life. But I've also been on the other side of it, to where when I, click that mouse to pay off my last student loan payment, and we had, just spent the past year paying off $25,000 in debt when we only made 50 that year, I felt like I was floating. I mean, it was an unbelievable
Yep.
feeling to just feel this weight just lifted off of our shoulders. And, that was pretty early on in our marriage. So it had a huge impact on us. But the stress and anxiety doesn't go away unless you face that fear. It's probably like the first time, you went to your first structure fire. There's a lot of stress going on. You don't really know what to do if you're brand new and all this kind of stuff. But then, you go to do that first one and you're like, okay, I've got some experience here. Then you do your second, third, fourth, and eventually, you're not stressed about it all. You're going into it cool as a cucumber.
Yep.
And it's the same thing with your money. If you've never dealt with it head on before, you're going to feel stress and anxiety. But once you get into the routine and rhythm of doing it and you start knocking out some of your financial goals, it just becomes, habit. You don't really even have to think about it at that point, which is when you get to the sweet spot of, when you're going to work. And this is what I think is extremely important about prioritizing your money and doing some of these little things like debt pay down and budgeting and whatever. Because when we go to work, you don't need to drag that stress in with you. You know, everybody's got this stress outside of the fire department. You know, we all got families. Many of us have second jobs. We may have marital issues, money issues. We got parents that are aging. We've got all these things. And when we show up to work, the county or city or whatever, you know, township that you work in needs you to be present and 100% there that day. If you're dragging in
Yep.
money stress, if you're dragging in all these things, which it's impossible to show up and be at 100% every day, but we need to be striving to, you know, increase that average. You know, if you're showing up 50% because you got, you know, debt issues and you got collectors calling, well, listen, let's pay that debt off. Then you can show up 75%. And then we can focus on, you know, whatever other issues that are dragging you down. Then you're showing up 90%. And you're always trying to, you know, increase that capability where you're showing up and you're fully present in the job. You're able to focus on the training. You're able to focus on, you know, hanging out with the guys and gals that you work with and really serving the citizens in the community that you work in.
Yeah. And I think another piece of that is, you know, that stress is at home as well. And so that's affecting your home life as well, obviously. And so, yes, I totally agree. The whole bringing it to work thing and the fewer problems we have at home makes it easier to focus on the job and enjoying the job. But really, just being able to have that relationship builder and use it for a relationship builder with your spouse is big. And that's something that I am definitely needing to work on myself, just to kind of be honest with myself is, you know, I've been in a situation where I had to do all that stuff back in a previous life, almost quotation marks, because excuse me, because nobody else was doing it. So I had to get good at it. And I had to know what the heck I was doing. And that's kind of when the whole got into Dave Ramsey and started learning that and really, I really enjoyed it. I really got into it. Well, I met my wife and, you know, that whole life changed a lot and just circumstances changed to where I kind of got away from it. And I've put it basically all on her plate, which is unfair, totally. And so now I'm having to get back in that area of our life because it, like I said, it's not fair and it's caused issues, me not being involved. And so I want to get back into using it as, like you said, you use it basically as a, you know, a marital counseling session, whatever, however you put it. But we can use these things as good things for our relationships, or we can let them happen to be bad things. And just like we talked about telling the money where to go, we can use them for good, or we can allow them to turn into bad things. And so I think if we really put work in, if we really try, we can use this as a way to communicate and build a relationship with our spouse as well.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying. You know, you got problems at home, you got problems at work, and you kind of drag these things back and forth. Once you start to improve one, the other starts to improve, and it becomes this feedback loop of, okay, well, home life is improving because now you know, we're doing what we need to do financially, we're budgeting, we're on the same page, and you go to work and you're not stressed about that. So now you can maybe put together a new training class because you have the mental capacity to do that. And then so somebody sees that and, you know, they see you doing well at your station. They're, you know, the thought, you know, seed gets planted in their head like, hey, maybe this guy will be good for a promotion. And you get promoted down the road. So now that, you know, work is better. And then that you take that home, you're happy because you had a good shift or you got promoted recently and all these, you go home and you're happier there. It just becomes this feedback loop that is made up of very small things. Like it's not like uh, you don't have to start, you know, investing thousands of dollars a week to, you know,
Yep.
tomorrow to start, you know, succeeding financially. It's small habits over time that lead to long-term financial success. And I think that carries over into the job where you show up and you can, you know, maybe be more compassionate with patients on EMS calls. Like when you're extremely stressed, about whatever it is, it's hard to connect with an individual on an EMS call and have, that empathetic viewpoint when you yourself are having struggles. And same thing when you've been there and you've felt that stress before and you come out the other side of it, you can start to see it in other firefighters. So now you can start to impact your crew positively by saying, hey man, I see what you're going through. I've been there before. Let's sit down and talk about it. Let's see what we can do to get you out, on the other side of the situation. So now you're increasing your crew integrity. You're helping each other out.
Yeah.
And it's just this positive feedback loop that, and it doesn't have to be money. I mean, money is kind of the thing that I like to talk about, but if you're having marital issues or issues with your children or whatever it is, whatever stress you're taking back and forth, you've got to focus on that thing and really, like the Knights at the Round Table, enter the forest at the darkest place that you can find, because that's where you're going to, make the most impact on your life, is solving those major issues. Then you go to work, you're happier, you're doing a better job, get promoted, boom, making more money. Now you can invest more, and it, becomes a feedback loop, but you can't view it in the short term. And that's where a lot of us get caught up is, we live day to day, paycheck to paycheck, month to month, and it can be difficult to view yourself as a 70-year-old individual in retirement drawing Social Security. I'm obviously kind of weird, but when I make decisions, I always ask myself, would my 70-year-old self agree with this? Is this a good decision for him? Because it's the same person. And they've actually done studies on
Yeah.
this to where, we have a disconnect between who we are today and who we're going to be in the future. And we
Yeah.
treat them as if they are a different person, and they're not. They're just us at a different time frame. And I think one of the studies I read where they just put a picture or something of like an older couple in a room with a financial advisor or something. And when there was a picture of an older couple there and like they saw it, they were more willing to invest more money when they saw a picture because they like identified with their older self somehow.
Uh,
Just this weird psychological thing. But we
yeah.
don't treat that 65-year-old version of ourselves as if they are us. So we don't make decisions that are good for them. We just make decisions that are good for us today, and that's often to the detriment of our 65-year-old selves.
Yeah. That's very interesting. That's something I don't think I've ever just said. Kind of that perspective really is what it is kind of taking yourself outside of where you're at and really focus on where you want to be and the things that it's gonna take to get you there. It's very interesting. There's, it's so funny, learning about different psychological things that like that. It's just like, nobody ever really realizes that stuff, but it's real, man. It's funny. So kind of beyond what we've talked about, is there anything else that you would like to kind of get into that you see firefighters or, people involved in the fire service or, anybody, first responders, areas that they need to learn about, areas that they need to get better in? Is any other things that you want to touch on?
So one thing that I would love to see happen in the fire service in general is that individual departments start investing in their people outside of just the skills and abilities that we need to get the job done as a firefighter, paramedic, EMT, whatever. I would love to see fire departments start investing in their individuals as far as their financial education or mental health, physical health, all these things that oftentimes are seen as kind of tertiary to what we do on a daily basis, but are extremely important to the overall well-being of your workforce. And, I've talked to many firefighters across many different departments that had the same experience that I had coming into the fire service. Hey, here's your retirement stuff. Here's a piece of paper, fill it out, tell us, how much you want to put into it and turn it back in tomorrow. What? Like nobody understands how to make that decision. So
Yeah.
if you want to invest in your employees' well-being and longevity within your department, make sure that they don't leave your department to go earn an extra $2,000 or $3,000 a year somewhere else by investing in their financial education, by showing them that, hey, we care about your long-term success. We're going to, put on this retirement seminar. We're going to have this budgeting workshop, whatever it is. Make it a part of the onboarding process of actually educating young firefighters and old firefighters alike of how to manage their money and how to plan for retirement. What types of insurances are most important? I have 4 rules for financial success: spend less than you make, save as much as you can, avoid financial ruin, and live your life, not theirs. And so spend less than you make, budgeting, save as much as you can, investing for long-term success. Avoid financial ruin. You need the emergency fund, you need life insurance, you need disability insurance, and live your life, not theirs. You don't need to keep up with the Joneses. Focus on what matters to you. And I think if we could get those kind of 4 principles instilled at firefighters at a young age, they wouldn't be leaving a department that has invested a lot in them, whether, they may went through a full recruit school there. At my department, it's 18 months. We go from zero to hero, firefighter, paramedic in 18 months. And oftentimes these, highly qualified candidates are leaving to make an extra $2,000 or $3,000 a year in salary, but they don't realize that their benefits are going to cost them more. They don't realize that their retirement is really not as good. They're not taking the entire picture into account. Whereas if we sat these folks down and we educated them on, how to make financial decisions, how to manage their money, how to spend less than they make, how to save as much as they can, how to avoid financial ruin, and how to live their life and not somebody else's, you're going to have a happy employee. You're going to have somebody who feels like, you've invested more in them just than the basic training that they have to show up and be a firefighter paramedic. And I think that kind of concept filters over into physical health. I think it's a huge issue within the fire service. You could just go to almost any career department, I think, across this country and walk in, and there's going to be at least 1 or 2 dudes who are overweight and, not really fit for duty. And that takes a department of being, proactive in that type of thing, really stressing physical health. Same thing with mental health. I've spoke with firefighters out on the West Coast, out in San Diego. They have a psychological services, psychiatrist, whatever, basically on retainer. And when they first implemented that program, I was speaking with Ben Vernon, which his story is just unbelievable. San Diego firefighter paramedic, stabbed multiple times on a just regular EMS call. And he was having severe PTSD, like nightmares every night, just an awful story of what he was dealing with. And at the time, San Diego PD had a company called Focus Psychological Services on retainer that any San Diego PD officer could go to and get help if needed. No questions asked, no money, no cost to them. They were on retainer with the department. And Ben went to, Focus as a San Diego firefighter, and they told him, hey, don't worry about it. FD doesn't have a contract with us, but we're going to, treat you anyways. But shortly after that, FD, had them on retainer too. And like, I think he said within the first couple months, like 100 firefighters had gone and been treated by a psychiatrist and had discussions and got psychological help. So, in today's day and age of, I think many fire departments have a revolving door on the bottom side of the department, especially ones that have gone away from the pension. You've got to start investing more in these people than just the standard fire service training. You got to care about their, financial well-being, their mental well-being, and their physical well-being. And if you can start investing in those things, while also, making sure that everything else is taken care of, you're taking care of the whole man. I truly believe that you can, retain top talent, but it takes more than just a numbers perspective. We got to have so many firefighters, so many paramedics. You need to really be focusing on the individual and making sure that you're educating them in these types of things and, prioritizing that. And that's a tall order, I know, to say. I would love to see that happen across fire departments. And I think a lot of fire departments just get caught up in the day-to-day. I know mine does, the daily grind of this, that, and the other. We get caught up in that stuff, and it's tough to sit back and, just like we need to do with our finances, question I always like to ask, leaders of departments, when I speak with them about especially if they're having retention issues, they always ask, why are people leaving? And I turn around, I always ask, well, why would they stay? And they always fumble through it. They can never give you a really good answer. I'm like, well, you've got to give these guys a reason to stay, especially if they don't have the pension
Yeah.
holding them there. They have got to have a good reason to stay, because there's fire departments all across this country that are willing to pay them, the same or better than what you are. So why
Yeah.
would they stay? So it's going to
Yeah.
take a mindset shift in the same way that we think about our financial goals on a 20 or 30-year time frame. Fire departments need to start looking out 10, 15, 20, 30 years. We got a guy coming in here, day one in 2020. What's going to keep him here for 30 years? What kind of changes do we need to make, or what kind of training do we need to give them, or what kind of organization do we need to have that's going to keep somebody here for 30 years in a non-pension system?
Yeah. No, I love that answer, and I totally agree on. I wish that was the case in these rookie schools or rookie academies or whatever, because you kind of mentioned three topics there: the financial, the fitness, and the mental health. And I think for the most part, most rookie academies, they are heavily involved in the fitness arena. They want to make sure that those people are fit. Whether or not that sticks once they get on shift, at least they're addressing that. But as far as the other two, absolutely nothing. I mean, in my rookie academy, I had a guy that came on shift. He went through the entire rookie school, did awesome. It was great. He was a great guy, did awesome in everything we did, and he lasted less than 2 months, I think. A month or two, and he resigned. He had a couple bad calls, and he was gone. And I just look back on that, and it's like, who failed him? Now, I think that's a good question for somebody to be asking, because, and not like I'm trying to point fingers here, but for that situation to happen, I just feel like somebody failed him. And maybe it was me being his friend and reaching out to. I don't know. It could be dozens of people. I'm not, like I say, I'm not trying to point fingers, but I think as a department, we need to start looking at it like that. People leaving, like you said, for a little bit better paycheck down the road, that maybe there's a lot more to it than just the paycheck. Maybe they're losing a lot of other things. If that's the case, somebody failed them because somebody did not reach out and give them the knowledge that they needed. And yeah, I like you would hope that it's the organization, the city, whatever it is that they're working for that does that. But if it's not, then we as coworkers and recruit buddies or whatever we are to these people, it needs to be our job, because if somebody else isn't going to do it, then we need to do at least the best we can to do a service to them.
Yeah. And I'm not meaning to point fingers at anybody either, but I would say that whenever you start talking about doing things like this, it's inevitable that somebody feels like you're blaming them for it, whether it's a fire service leader, chief, whatever. And that's really not what it's about. Cause I have no idea what that individual's job is like. And I'm sure it's extremely difficult. They're probably making decisions that I obviously have no idea about. I'm just a firefighter paramedic who likes talking about money. So, but what I would say is that if we're not focused on getting better, then what are we doing? And that's really what it comes down to, because there's something that I always think about called the Red Queen problem, which is actually from Alice in Wonderland, where the Red Queen says, in order to stay put, you have to run as fast as you can. And that's happening every day. We're running as fast as we can. We're working as hard as we can just to stay put, just to maintain what we are, just to, keep our level of staffing and our trucks running and all this kind of stuff. if we're running as fast as we can just to stay, just to stay where we are, we've got to focus on actually getting better so we can get ahead. We can't just focus on maintaining. We got to take steps to evolve and become more. And if you're not focused on doing that, then you're honestly just falling behind. There's no such thing as staying
Yep.
put. You're either moving forward or you're falling behind. And it's not a fingers pointing kind of thing. There's days when I suck too. I show up and don't want to do anything. But on average, we need to be focused on getting better. So, if you've got recruits, those highly qualified recruits, like you said, jam up guy that did well through recruit school and he's leaving 2 months in, we need to be finding out what caused that, do many companies call it a post-mortem. If they have a venture that fails, maybe a new company or something, and it fails, they do
Yep.
a post-mortem analysis. What caused this to fail? What caused that individual to leave? And over time, you do that for 5 or 7 or 10 years, you come up with many answers. Then you can start implementing solutions. Because whenever you have a problem, whether it's financial or something in the fire department, you actually have to define the problem first. Make sure you're working on the right problem, and then you can focus on solutions. Otherwise, if you don't get the problem right, you could just throw a bunch of solutions at it, and you're never really fixing the underlying issue.
Just wasting your time and your effort for nothing.
Yeah. And it takes, it takes a lot of thought to sit down and think that problem through on the front side. And that's really where, I think many people that are much smarter than me would say you need to spend most of your time just defining the problem. And then once you've defined that problem, and this is financial or otherwise, then once you define the problem, then you come up with a solution and you put it in action. And then once you put something in action, you get feedback. Then you can maneuver.
Yep.
Maybe the feedback you get was saying, hey, we need to do something else. We can maneuver in real time. But until you define that problem and then, come up with a solution from there, you're just kind of throwing, darts at a dartboard in the dark.
Yeah. That's good stuff, man. I really enjoyed kind of digging into this stuff and learning from you, and I will definitely be keeping up with what you're putting out because, like I said, it's something I need to be getting more involved in. So I will look forward to that. So what do we have coming in the future for Matt Broom and the financial world or the podcast or whatever?
So the podcast, once again, called the 2448 podcast. We had new episodes coming out every Tuesday. Captain Jeremy Sanders was on there this past Tuesday. Every other Friday, I put out a series called Making Ends Meet, which is focused on personal finance topics and issues. So that comes out on Paycheck Friday. So every other Friday we get paid, I drop a Making Ends Meet episode. And that could be anything from budgeting to goal setting to investing to insurance, whatever. A lot of different topics covered in that. Occasionally I'll bring on other firefighters that are involved in, personal finance or have a real interest in it. We'll discuss topics. So definitely check that out. If you have any questions over anything, whether it's retirement or personal finance or budgeting or anything at all, you can always email me at matthew@the2448podcast.com, matthew@the2448podcast.com. As far as the future with the personal finance stuff, I really think the education side of it is the most important. The financial literacy, it's the backbone of long-term financial success. So if there's any firefighters out here listening to this that want to team up and start coming up with materials that we can start putting out more content and teaching more firefighters about these basics of personal finance, please reach out to me. I've got a couple of contacts already that are kind of focused in this area. And I would love to see, just crowdsourcing educational materials for firefighters on how to be financially successful. So if you're interested in that type of thing, hit me up. I would love to collaborate on other firefighters with those types of materials.
Awesome. Yeah, I think I bring it up basically every time I have a guest on, but I think it's so important for us, you and me, and all the guests I've had on, all the guests you've had on, to make these connections and to grow this network of people that are trying to do good things for the fire service. It doesn't matter if it's somebody that's trying to better the fitness, or somebody that's trying to better the financial area, whatever. We're all doing the same things, just in different ways, and whatever help we can give each other is so important. So I really hope that people reach out to you that are one, interested in helping, and two, interested in learning. So
Yeah, and
my challenge
if you
out
need
there,
any help, hit me up.
yeah,
I've done financial advising for the last 2 years under my own company, Forward Focus FP, Forward Focus Financial Planning, and I found that many firefighters are hesitant to pay for financial advice, which I totally understand. That's why I'm actually working on pivoting the company into this education sector, because I think I'll be able to serve the firefighter population better than just on the individual financial planning relationship. So there's a lot of changes coming there to forward focused financial planning. I'll probably try to transition it into more of a coaching type of relationship that is not as costly as a full-time financial planning relationship, but then focusing on that education side of it. Cause I don't want to,
yep,
I don't want to keep firefighters from contacting me when it comes to needing financial help and advice. Um, and I think the financial planning relationship has definitely kept people from reaching out with questions that they have. And really, I want to serve our brothers and sisters in the fire service when it comes to making financial decisions. So there will be some changes to that coming up, but I'm looking forward to pivoting and really doing my best to help out our brothers and sisters.
that's awesome. And I just want to challenge everybody out there, if you are on your first day on shift, or if you got 20 or 30 years on, if you haven't done anything, I want to challenge you to reach out, learn something, do something, get something going. And as far as your finances go, of course, it's going to help the earlier you get started, but something is better than nothing. So I hope that everybody learned a lot today, and kind of getting in the mindset of digging into this stuff and really paying attention to what's going on, and hopefully being able to use your money how you want it instead of working for it. So Matt, I really appreciate you coming on today.
I really appreciate you having me on, brother.
No problem. Look forward to where it goes in the future and learning more from you. So I thank you for that.
Well, thank
And
you.
everybody out there, I hope to look forward to talking to you next time. So till then, thank you.